Welcome back with a smiling face. Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. The Exile's Return. Episode 4. Chapter 20. Derek POV. His phone was ringing. He was aware that Kellen was about to come face to face with his parents and his brother. He was hoping it went well, that there was no trouble, that Kellen could handle it, knowing that this was not about her but Michael and Ray and be able to differentiate between him sending people to corner her and the reason for the dinner. She being affiliated with Ray had come as a complete surprise to them all. Ray had talked about her like a sister to Michael. This dinner could go one of two ways. Kellen would remain calm and let them work on their bond, or she could turn it into a nightmare causing trouble for his brother and his mate. He was praying for the first, not just for her sake but for his brother and Ray too. The time of the call was barely midnight, so only 9 ish over there. Father flashed on the phone's screen. This was not going to be good, he thought, taking a deep breath before answering the call. Yes, he stated, leaving all pleasantries aside. Get on your plane and get over here. No, his father stated, in that no-nonsense tone, meaning there was to be no arguing period. Then he simply hung up. Derek was sitting in his office, patiently waiting a call on the outcome of the dinner. Clearly, it had not gone as planned. He called the family pilot and organized the plane be ready for takeoff within the next hour. Making sure they had a direct flight to a private airstrip. He could not be detained by the human police for leaving his state and breaching the current human world court order. Not if it truly was bad, it would only make things more difficult. He wondered just how bad it had gotten. Havoc was worried too, prowling around in his mind like he was stalking his favorite prey, his ears flat against his head and his tail swishing furiously, though he was quiet on the thought front. Never good, the calm before the storm. It was a 5-hour flight. There was a car waiting at the airstrip. It was just after 0130 in the morning when he arrived. He'd already had a bunch of messages. She was missing. No one seemed to know where she was. She had run from the restaurant and no one knew where to. His father had simply said it was bad and he had been able to hear his mother sobbing in the background. Ethan was with him. He'd left Abby in charge of the pack, for the first time ever. Wow, her head had nearly exploded with the power. She-Wolf loved running things. She was a bossy bee, tch at the best of times, hot-blooded and loved giving out orders, a typical alpha. Ethan drove them straight to the hotel suite Jackson and Steven were using to run things from. He was surprised to see them both sitting calmly on the couch, a drink in hand, apparently waiting for his arrival. They well should be out there looking for her. He was about to let Havoc loose on them. The snarl that came from him as a warning shot them both to their feet. Jackson quickly spoke. She's at home. He reined in Havoc, and his beast went willingly knowing his mate was safe. What happened? He snapped. Your guess is as good as ours. Steven sighed, shaking his head. Apparently, they were also in the dark. Was it really that bad? Mate needs us, we go now. Havoc growled at him. He was determined to get to her and being this close was keeping him on the surface. The not knowing of what had gone down was keeping their adrenaline high. His wolf was feeding off of it, it seemed. So father hasn't informed anyone of what happened then? They both shook their heads, sitting back down again. He watched Steven drain his glass and frowned. The man liked to sip his bourbon, liked to savor the taste. Unlike him to drain a glass like that, he didn't like it. That meant he was stressed, which likely meant so was his mate. Mate needs us, Havoc reiterated. Derek pushed him away for now. He needed more information. Ignoring his beast was not a good idea. But if he let him loose in a city, it would only be bad for everyone, humans and wolves alike. Not to mention he would probably scare the living hell out of their pups and her too. He called his father. He did not care what time it was. Alpha Blaine picked up right away. "We'll talk later, we have another problem to deal with." "What could be more important than my mate?" he practically roared down the line. His anger at his father ignited. Michael's human mate's family yanked Ray Ray from the restaurant the minute Kellen ran, and no calls are being picked up. Not even Ray Ray is taking Michael's calls. Michael is at a loss. "I'm sorry, son, but you may have to handle Kellen on your own for the moment." Derek sighed. He couldn't blame them. Human mates were hard to deal with, especially one as prominent as Ray Ray. She was an heiress to the Hill Foundation and just couldn't disappear without a trace. It would be noticed by a lot of people, especially her family. On the bright side, when Michael did manage to bring her in, she would have Kellen for comfort in her new environment and to help with the transition to being a werewolf. "It's fine, sort out Michael's mate." "LOL, sort out my mess, what's wrong with Mum?" he finally asked. "She is distressed about everything, we'll discuss it in the morning, son." The line disconnected. Derek turned to Jackson and Steven. "How was she when she got home?" Not only did he want to know, he knew Havoc did too. His need to be with his mate was bordering on obsessive. At some point there would be no stopping him, and anyone who got in his way was going to be ripped to shreds in all likelihood. He sat himself down across from them. Knew Havoc was watching, assessing their every move, would be listening for every inflection in their tone of voice. He knew they knew Havoc was right there on the surface. There was a slight roughness to his voice that implied they were both speaking at the same time, their thoughts aligned completely. "Quiet," Steven said. Derek raised an eyebrow. That meant absolutely nothing to him, normally quite chatty. "Narky chatty, but nothing. She didn't even look at us really, just glanced at us, tossed our phones out the door and closed and locked it. From what I heard, checked on the children. Nate was either still awake or woken. She had a quiet word with him, reassured him everything was fine, then went to bed." Jackson informed him calmly. "Didn't even wake the nanny to go home." Steven piped in. Everyone was staring at Steven now. Why mention that? Derek thought he didn't care about the human nanny. None of them would, she was non-essential. He'd vetted her, nothing out of the ordinary. 24 had been a nanny since she was 20, normal human family. Jackson, however, turned, looked at Steven with a sly smile. "Is that where you've been sneaking off to bang the nanny?" "No," Steven shot back, "just monitoring her to make sure she's not being paid by another pack to spy on Kel and on the pups is all." He sounded quite defensive actually, like he didn't like having to justify his actions where the human was concerned. All of a sudden, Ethan jumped on him, knocking him off the couch and onto the ground, holding him down. "You lie." He was grinning at his friend. "Liar, liar, not lying," Steven stated, trying to fight him off. "You're so doing the nanny." Jackson burst out, leaned down and started shaking him. Spill it. He was laughing at his friend. They were playfully pummeling him, trying to get the truth out. They knew a lie when they heard one. Derek watched on, his mood lifted a little. He knew his mate was safely tucked up in her apartment with their pups for the moment, and to be honest, he needed a break from all the stress. Even Havoc chortled in his mind. He's so mating the nanny. Derek got up and jumped into the harassment of his friend, and suddenly Steven was being rolled around and pummeled by all of them. His efforts to get away were futile. He spilled it. Suzy was his human mate and he was sneaking off to watch her. He'd scented her that first day they'd gone to Kellen's apartment. When she had come out to go home, Rafe had gone nuts, screaming mate over and over in his mind. So, yes, he'd been sneaking off to watch her each night. No actual contact yet, Steven told Rafe. She would have to wait. Kellen there, Luna would have to take priority. Rafe was annoyed but understood, it was his duty as much as Stephen's to protect Kellen. So when Kellen was safely tucked up for the night, they'd sneak off to watch their mate for a few hours. It placated them both. Jackson had laughed the most and punched him. "No wonder you were instant on us babysitting the babysitter while Kellen was out for dinner. I did think it odd." Stephen just smirked. "What can I say?" "Nothing." Ethan shoved him about. "Lucky bastard, when are you gonna mate and mark her? I bet you're itching to." "Don't know yet," he shrugged, ignoring the rest of the comment. "Bring her back to the pack with Kellen," Derek offered up. "LL, give her a job." "Heck, if she wants she can stay their nanny, that would be fine with Kellen." "Imagine, and being the Gamma's mate, it's fine with me, thanks boss." Stephen nodded. "LD also be fine with her being their nanny too, but..." They all laughed at him, knowing he was thinking about not just mating her but impregnating her as quickly as he could, and another round of pummeling started on him. They were all roughhousing, teasing him. Poor bastard was going to be tormented no end for trying to keep it a secret. His father arrived at 7 a.m. They were up, only managed a few hours sleep. Surprisingly, Derek had gotten 3.5 hours sleep himself. The most he'd had in a row in weeks. He could occasionally nap on and off, but actual decent sleep was now a mystery to him. It was like he just didn't know how anymore. He knew it was because he was worried about his mate Bond and how to fix it, that she and his pups were out there in the human world in danger of being snatched, or harmed every second of the day and night. That she was right, he'd turned the spotlight onto them. It was his fault, they were in danger, and his guilt, Havoc's guilt, would eat at them when they tried to sleep. Only actual exhaustion of his body and mind allowed them to get a few hours sleep each night. The rest was just tossing and turning because their minds wouldn't shut off. His father looked tired, not something that you would normally see. He was strong and dependable, rational, and currently so laid back nothing fazed him. He must be utterly emotionally exhausted and worn out. Derek knew it wasn't because his mother had bedded him all night long, that gave his father a happy tired nature, a constant lazy smile on his face. This was something different. He sank down onto the couch and accepted the cup of espresso. "Kel Anand Arya," he sighed, "are not in a good state, son, made your mother's maternal instincts to breaking point. Your mate's emotional state around you is dreadful, to be honest." Derek frowned. "What do you mean exactly?" Havoc was up and intently listening. "Go to mate now, just wait a bit, hear father out. She actually believes you mean harm to her, or that you are going to separate her from her pups. She and Arya's distress levels during a conversation with your mother flowed out of her so much it physically affected your mother, brought her actual pain, which in turn I felt, and got me out of my chair, damn fast. I thought she was injured, that Kellen had physically harmed her. Is Mum all right?" Derek now had something else to worry about. The worries were just piling up more and more. "To be honest, no," she sobbed herself to sleep. "I have never seen her do that in all the years I've known her." He drained his espresso, sobbed something about Luna ability in overdrive. "Kellen can't control it, so her distress flowed like the Luna calm, but Luna distress, it actually overpowered your mother altogether. She was hit with everything that girl feels, her anxiety, fear, distress, it's all very unreal and deeply embedded into them." Derek was leaning forward now. "How is it possible that Kellena's Luna abilities, she doesn't even know I'm her mate? And in reverse, flowing distress?" Stephen frowned. "I don't know." His father shook his head. "LD suggest asking your mother, but I doubt you'd get a coherent answer out of her at the moment." He ran his hands through his hair, pulling on it as he did when frustrated. "What I do know, son, is why she is fighting so hard against you. So hard not to come home, why she is so very defiant. To protect her pups from your Luna." "What?" Derek's frown deepened. Sophia has been gone a long time. Yes son, you and I know that, but she didn't know that. I informed her last night. I did it in the hope that it would calm her down and bring her stress levels under control a bit. Did it work? Not at all. He shook his head and sighed heavily. You want the kicker? Probably not. But go ahead. Both he and Havoc knew they were not going to like what was about to come out of his mouth. Arya sized me up. I have not heard such a viscous threatening sound like that. She was ready to try and take me on. To be honest, even Storm my wolf wasn't sure he could take her. She sounded all primal in her demeanor. He shook his head. I couldn't understand it. We always got along, never had any issues, no animosity between us. It was very concerning to say the least. Derek's eyes were wide now. In public? He asked. Yes, Arya didn't care at all, was definitely going to attack me. I think your mother understood. What Storm and I got was a load of pure aggression pouring out of him, and then my instincts kicked in. I was ready to shift in less than a second, all my alpha blood boiling and pumping through us, ready to fight her. She was challenging you. I don't know if it was a challenge, so to speak, but a fight it was going to be. I can only imagine a very one, and the outcome, either you or your mother, would have been made less by the end of it. Fear was creeping into him and Havoc. Indeed. I'll go talk to her. Stephen was on his feet instantly. I'll go with you. Jackson piped up. You two can't even stand to be in the same room together at the moment. Stephen shot at him. I'm fine, trust me, she just knows how to push my buttons. I'll be fine. Derek let them go, but as they got to the door, wait, maybe she just needs some space. Watch her, but don't get close. Back all the wolves off to a safer distance, close enough to help if trouble arises, but far enough away to give her breathing room. He needed her to calm down. Mate strong. Appears so. Good, I want a strong mate. Derek, however, was worried. If she truly wanted away from him at all cost, nothing was going to stop her. If Arya was willing to take on his father, would she do the same to them? No, Mate will want us. Mate appears terrified of us. Havoc. Mark and Mate. You think that is the answer to everything? Derek frowned. Havoc snorted. Mark and Mate. He repeated firmly. It was impossible to sway his wolf. Havoc wanted his mate and would have her whether she liked it or not. Perhaps after all this time on her own, she can't handle all the wolf attention she is suddenly getting. Or perhaps she has lived in fear, for all these years, that it's all she knows now. His father replied, sadness etched into his words. We did this to her. His chest ached with pain. He sighed. He had really ked things up. I need to get her onto Pack territory where I can contain her. Could possibly help though. If I were you, son, I'd be bring out the big guns. What exactly are the big guns, father? He was confused. There isn't anything more powerful than you or I. His father laughed at him. Still learning, I see. Oh yes there is, son. He let it hang in the air a full minute before realizing Derek had no idea what he was talking about and continued, aren't you always aiming to please your mother on all accounts? Mum's already tried, got broken from my understanding. He frowned at his father. Not your mother, son. Her mother. Children, no matter how old, always want their mummy. Even you. Derek snorted in disbelief. Come on, son, I've seen that fear when she stalks into a room and you know you're about to get it. His father smirked at him. Even the mighty alpha before me backs down to his mummy. Ethan barked with laughter, but stopped dead when Derek shot him a death glare. Unfortunately, they had all seen him raise his hands defensively and submit to his mother on occasion, not often but certainly where Kellen was concerned. So you want me to bring Vera out here? Couldn't hurt, son. I'll think on it. He nodded, Vera and her mate Jody and their son Bradley had not talked to him since he'd banished her. Jody had even stopped training the Alpha team. Stated point blankly to his face, respect will be given when it is earned, and he had simply walked away from the unit, a unit he had been training all their lives. The loss of his daughter had hurt him, and he now only trained the junior wolves, and would not be swayed. Not even his father had been able to convince him. Derek hadn't been privy to the conversation between the two of them, and his father had not relayed it ever. Her brother Bradley, an excellent warrior, trained and in line to take over his father's position, had also walked away from the position when it was offered to him. Now he assisted his father with the juniors. Though that had worked out quite well for the pack, as all the youngsters were well trained, hand to hand before they even got their wolves, made them better and more efficient fighters. His pack was actually stronger now than it had been 6 years ago. Vera was still running the pack creche but avoided him, even when his mother had asked him to pick up his baby sister Holly from the creche. Vera would see him coming and turn and walk away, leaving one of the other she-wolves to get her. When usually the drop-off and delivery was done by Vera herself as the lead wolf running the creche, but not where he was concerned. He was actually totally surprised they hadn't defected back to her original pack. That thought brought his mind to his conversation with Jackson about Alpha Austin's offer to join the Shadow Crest pack. "Father, do you know of Alpha Austin? From Shadow Crest pack?" "Yes." "Yes, why?" "He's personally offered Kellen a place in his pack, and she is actually entertaining the idea, I believe." That grabbed his father's attention. A frown appeared on his face and he looked directly at his son. "Why him?" "Apparently her grandmother is from there," he elaborated. "Oh," he seemed to think about it for a long time. Several minutes went by without a word. "I wouldn't allow it. Not that he would harm her or your pups. Quite the opposite, I think. A good pack for her to go to, if you weren't her mate, that is." "Then why not allow it?" He was very curious. If this pack could make her feel safe, then he should let her. Perhaps good for them to calm down and feel safe. He could always call Alpha Austin and explain she was his mate and get permission to visit. Much better circumstances than now, and it wasn't that far from his pack, just a 2-hour drive. She didn't have to be told he was coming, just let her smell him and hunt out her mate. That might actually solve the issue at hand. Havoc huffed. He was unhappy, but it could work. The man is unmated son. For nearly a century, he has women falling all over himself to be the future Luna of his pack. He's considered one of the best-looking wolves there is. He's on the Alpha Council, is well respected and liked by most, not many enemies to be honest, and his pack is exceptionally strong. Everyone trains, even the Omegas rank up to warrior status if they so desire. He is fair and honest. Treats his pack with respect and they give it back in spades. So, why should this bother him? If he was fair and honest, that meant hearing she was his mate just meant that the man would allow him to come for her. Might be an ulterior motive in there somewhere. He is very strategic. Kelani's very easy on the eye, her wolf is stunning and fierce. It'll undoubtedly attract him to her, and she has 3 pups already. So fertile. He has no heirs that I am aware of. If he takes them in, he might decide to choose her as his chosen mate, and if she says yes for whatever reason, protection most likely, he'll likely bleed your pups into his line and bam, he has a male heir instantly and one with alpha blood. You'll have no claim to them at all after that. I call him first and make sure he knows I'm her mate. He might not care, son, if he's offering a place. He has likely seen the battle going on and is on her side. It will appear to the council you harmed her, and if they find out you harmed your mate they may take her side. You never know with them, and he's on the council. No one takes our pups, Havoc snarled. I know, buddy. Derek tried to placate him. I'll agree. I don't think Kellen would accept a chosen mate. She was always a big believer in fated mates. It's one of the reasons when I met Sophia, she stepped back and didn't even get mad. A good wolf she is, his father agreed, just something else that will attract an alpha male in search of a good mate. Could you call him them? Yes, son, I will give him a call and alert him to the nightmare that is your mating bond. See what he says. Perhaps he'll bring her in and you can go there to find her. That's my thoughts exactly. If she needs time to calm down and feel safe, then I owe it to her to give it to her. Mate needs us. Havoc sighed. He saw the logic but didn't like it. I know, but distress and fear overwhelms our mate. Arya needs me. Havoc grumbled. Just wait, I promise, just 1 week and we'll go and get her ourselves. What if not there? He huffed. It's likely she will go there, her grandmother is there. He could feel Havoc's resistance to the idea. He was not patient in the least and he was doing his best to be at the moment, something Derek really appreciated. Especially with them being so close to their mate, maybe 35 to 40 minutes away. But from what his father had told them today, it might not go down so well. His mum was broken by her distress. If her distress poured out in front of Havoc, it could set him off into a raging uncontrollable beast here in the human world, and neither of them needed that. Nor did Havoc need for Arya or the pups to see how uncontrollable his anger could get, might just frighten her even further. Even if they recognized them as their mate, she might reject him on the spot. I'll go and call him. I should get back to your mother, who's in charge back home if we are all here. Abby. Goddess help us all. He half laughed. Hopefully it's still your pack, son, when you get home. It will be. I threatened her mate if she so much as thought about trying to take over while I'm away. Did you now? Derek waved his hand dismissively and leaned back in his chair. It's fine. He watched his father leave. Ethan was staring at him. You did make her believe you though, right? Of course I did. Derek laughed. Everyone was terrified something would happen to him and she was going to take over. He rubbed a hand over his face. He was feeling tired again, needed a proper sleep, but doubted he would get it. Just one more possible issue piling up on him and his mate bond. Would he ever be able to sort it out? We need to research anything on Luna powers that could indicate a reason why they would be in reverse. Yet and how she got them in the first place. You know, she was such a happy wolf, so full of life and playful all the time. How did it come to this? Has she been so full of fear all these years that she can't comprehend anything else? I don't know, Ethan. I hope not. What if the pups are also affected just like that? He didn't want to think about it, to be honest. Neither did Havoc. Derek felt him suddenly recede to the back recesses of his mind. Not a good thing, not when he did it willingly. He was probably planning his own agenda back there, and when he enacted it, Derek just knew he was not going to be able to stop him. So much pain and distress, it broke Mum. That can't be a good thing at all. How are we going to bring her in? Carefully, perhaps let her go for now altogether. He didn't like it, but it might be the only option. What? Havoc will never agree to that. Havoc will understand. Her mental state needs to come first. We know she thinks I want to punish her for that hit to Sophia. We know she thinks or blames me for her injuries that day. We know she felt all our anger and fury and couldn't send us because of the drugged state she was in. She just found out last night that Sophia and Elle are no longer mates, and so maybe some of that fear will go away. Worrying that your Luna would hurt your pups, a legitimate fear, would have always been a constant fear for her. That can go now. He thought to himself. Perhaps things might start to get better now. We need to wait and see what will happen over the next day or two. give her room to breathe and calm down. Let's start researching then, boss. Chapter 21. Kellen POV. Nate woke her, her eyes opened and she was staring right at his face. It was barely an inch from hers, his big bright green eyes held a question in them, he was worried about something, she could sense it. See it actually, it was written all over his beautiful face. What's wrong, baby? She asked and then yanked him into the bed for a cuddle. You didn't come home on time. Long night, is all. I am fine, she hugged him reassuringly, not that she actually felt it. Suzy just left. Okay. How about we just get away for the day, go to the beach? Winter is almost here. It might be our last chance to get there for a while. She really did just want to forget everything that happened last night, even if it was just for a few hours. Could they just be a normal happy family unit for a few measly hours? She knew the kids could be, but could she? She didn't know, but would definitely try. Yay, he practically screamed in excitement and started to struggle to get up and out of her arms. I'll tell the girls. Kellen let him get out of her arms, she set herself up. Her eyes burned with not enough sleep, she really did need this. Last night had drained both her and Arya completely. Arya was still settled in the back of her mind, she would not wake her. Poor Wolf had been through so much in just a short amount of time. Kellen had never felt so much fury come from her wolf as she did last night. Pure instinctual rage and aggression, the primal need to fight for her pups had completely taken over her, and nothing, not even an alpha wolf, was going to take her away from her pups. If there had been an actual fight last night, Kellen knew that Arya would have been fighting with everything she had, with every ounce of goddess-gifted strength and aggression she had been gifted with. Kellen had always known Arya was a strong, tough wolf, but they had never had the need to use all of her abilities, till now that was. It would have been a fight to the death. There would have been no stopping her once it started. She got up out of her bed and yawned, could hear her children yelling and talking to each other all excitedly, getting everything they needed ready for the trip to the beach. Goddess knew they all needed a good bit of stress relief. That thought brought Tim to her mind. She wondered if he would come over tonight. She'd call him, could really use a hug herself, and if anything else happened, well, she'd use it to get as much stress out of her as possible. Poor bastard, better hydrate well before Hftami's over. She washed her makeup off from last night. No wonder Nate had been worried. There were noticeable runs from her eyeliner and mascara down her face where she had been crying. She didn't even actually recall tears falling, knew she had sobbed at Arya, but when had the tears streamed out of her? Had she looked this bad when she had come home last night? Was that why Jackson and Stephen had stared at her with concerned looks on their faces? If this was how she had come down from the roof, then it was possible they were genuinely concerned about her, especially if they had no idea of what happened. She scrubbed her face clean, brushed her teeth and hunted her blue and white striped bikini and dark blue shorts, pulled on a white loose-fitting overshirt and a pair of sandals. Stepped out of her bedroom to find the girls wearing matching yellow swimsuits with white polka dots and a white frilly ruffle around their hips and off their shoulders. Goddess, they were so cute, so beautiful. Nate wore a dark blue sun shirt and black board shorts, all had sandals on. They ate breakfast and were then out of the building and on their way by 10 a.m. It was a good day. She didn't smell a single wolf, thank the goddess. While she watched the children play, she sent Suzy a message apologizing for the lateness of her return and informed her she had paid her for the entire night. Suzy told her it was not necessary, Kellen relayed it was already done and not a worry about it. Thanked her for being such a wonderful person and helping her out so much. It took her a good 45 minutes to get her up and actually start playing with her children. Arya was up and wanted to run around and chase them too. So that was what they did, splashing water on them, tossing them into the ocean where the waves were only small today, they could all swim. They kept running at her, begging to be picked up and tossed into the water. She and Arya obliged their every whim. This was what was worth it to her, these moments of fun and laughter, their family time together. As long as nothing happened, they could be in a pack in as little as a week, possibly stay there and actually try and assimilate into a pack, one with her grandmother. Give her precious babies the life they should have always known. Shadow Crest Pack would be steeped in snow very soon and the kids would get their first taste of a white winter. She and Arya were sure her own grandmother would help them build their first snowman and have their first snowball fight. She was actually looking forward to it. If all went well, she would not be coming back to the human world. That might tick Eric off, but he would just have to understand. She would be safe from Derek there and that was what was best for her children and herself. She hoped he wouldn't be too pissed off. She would have to give up all her clients, they would be upset or angry with her but she would recommend them to other lawyers that would suit their needs. The actual thought of belonging to a pack was a little overwhelming. She had been alone too long, she guessed, might take some getting used to, or she might just be able to relax and fit right in. She had no idea at this point, not after last night's revelation about her own emotional state. She and the triplets all flopped down on their towels after a good hour of running around laughing and having fun, actual fun. Somewhere along the way she did actually forget about her fears, it was nice. She bought them ice cream from the surf club shop, and got herself a strawberry milkshake. They all argued playfully over what to have for lunch and ended up with burgers and fries. They ate out, a nice little cafe not that far from the beach. And then returned to the apartment to let the triplets spend the afternoon watching movies, while she caught up on the housework. She sat them down and told them about their upcoming trip to her grandmother's next weekend. She saw they were all shocked. She had never mentioned any family to them before, but they seemed excited about the trip and the prospect that it might already be snowing there. Chapter 22. Stephen POV. They were perched on a sand dune some distance away, just watching their future Luna, unaware of what she actually was to them, and ordered not to tell her either. Their alpha wanted her to send him of her own accord, thought it would be better that way, so she wouldn't think that they were trying to trick her into coming home. Frustrating to say the least. If he could only tell her, he knew that he could bring her in, he could use his charm to convince her and get her to cooperate. She was his job, to protect and serve as the Luna and her pup's guards. She would have to believe him, otherwise why would he be here in the first place? It bugged him that she hadn't already thought of that, her sloth, but then she may just think he was here for the pups alone. But if that was the case, why was he always with her and not them? Stubborn she-wolf. Jackson was sitting beside him, filming the antics that were taking place. It had taken her a long time to join in with the children, probably still too stressed about last night. His eyes moved to the beta. You miss her, he commented, looking at the smile on the man's face. It was all happiness. He was enjoying watching her. Whether it was because she was finally displaying happiness herself, or because he was seeing her in new light, a mother who was good with her pups, or because she was near naked in that bikini, he was yet to figure out. Heck, it could be a combination of all three things. So do you, he replied casually back, not taking his eyes off of her. Not like you do, his implication left hanging in the air. Jackson turned and looked at him with a raised eyebrow. What are you trying to say? That you've had a crush on Kellen for like forever? So, I'm allowed to look? He shrugged, his attention turning back to the person in question. Only till she comes home, then what? Then nothing, everything goes back to the way it used to be, doesn't it? She'll be with Derek once again just like before. Is that going to be a problem? No, she is not my fated mate. Just cute and nice to look at. You sure about that? Yes, Steven. I would never betray the Alpha, punch him in the face maybe, but never betray him. Good, because I'd hate to get her back only to lose you over it. Jackson chuckled. I want the group back together as well. Like old times. Let's hope we can get back to it. Steven mused aloud. Jackson looked right at him and nudged him. Come on Stevie, look at our girl. If that isn't our Kellen right there, I'll be running around in dead of winter packs risking my favorite parts playing with frostbite in the frigid cold weather. Steven burst out laughing. The use of his friendly nickname, plus the use of our girl, that was how they had all referred to her. Where is our girl? When is our girl coming home from uni? What time is our girl supposed to bring dinner? Let's go hunt our girl down, etc. You're such an idiot, but seriously, I saw how you and Apollo alike reacted to her when she flirted with the two of you in her office. Yet I guess, can't help it. His eyes moved back to Kellen. Just look at her, Derek is going to go completely nuts seeing her in that tiny bikini, ha ha ha, I can't wait to see his reaction. Probably run off for a shower and well you know, he wiggled his eyebrows at Steven suggestively. Steven punched him and they were both laughing out loud now, at the thought of their Alpha needing to get a release with all of them sharing a suite. Ha ha, would he? Steven wondered. He knew, they all knew, Havoc had not allowed a single she-wolf near him since his failed mate bond, 2.5 years of nothing. That was a long time for wolves who were naturally horny critters. Alphas had needs stronger than the average wolf too. Is that why you're filming the woman? Is it to torture him or embarrass him? Jackson grinned at him, a little of both, guess. Wanna have a bet on how long it takes him to hit the shower? Steven chuckled, his fear of Jackson's ideas on their future Luna appeased for now. Yep, I reckon less than 5 minutes after he sees it. You want to bet on how long he stays in the shower? Steven practically rolled over laughing. You're on, at least 30 minutes. They sat and watched her. She was a great mum, Steven thought. Goddess help their Alpha to get her back and don't let Havoc screw it up and go all beastly scaring her to death. They watched from their car as she took the kids out for burgers and fries, a typical Saturday of no work, relaxing, and from what he'd heard this morning, she truly did need it. Hearing about her distress, his instincts had wanted him to come rushing over to her and wrap her up in his gamma charm to help ease her distress. It was everything he was built to do and he well couldn't do it. She needed to relax and unwind and feel free and safe even if for a day. Keeping their distance was a good idea, he thought. Perhaps Derek did know what he was doing leaving her out here in the human world for now, who knew? Steven personally want to tranquilize the she-wolf and her 3 pups and transport them back to the pack, though that hadn't gone down well last time, but he would do it himself so he could make sure she stayed unconscious the entire trip. He would put them all in the Alpha's suite, her directly in his bed, and she would wake up next to him. The first thing she would smell would be her mate, and then she would roll over and see him, smile, and bingo, problem solved. They would surely mate and mark right away. It wasn't as if they had never had S*X before. They had 3 pups and had been sleeping together every weekend she'd been home from university for over a year. His way would be much quicker, much more efficient too, he thought. Perhaps I should bring it up with the Alpha, though Steven was pretty certain he would never agree to it. So he figured he had only one ally in this plan. She was completely crazy and would totally approve it, but for his way to be obtained their Alpha himself would have to be completely incapacitated. Treasonous thought that Rafe piped in. But would solve the issue and then we could come and get Suzy. Still he would punish us terribly. Would be worth it. Chapter 23. Derek POV. The research was going nowhere on Reverse Luna's powers, but they had found more than a dozen cases where the goddess herself saw fit to gift out Luna's abilities to she-wolves for various reasons. Most to do with them having alpha pups without the alpha knowing about it. Another reason was to attract multiple alpha mates who could protect her and her pups. The goddess also saw fit to gift her she-wolves the right to choose a mate for herself due to varying traumatic situations that they had been through in their lives. It appeared she watched out for her she-wolves, some more than others it seemed. Well, his girl fit all of those descriptions. Derek could only pray to the goddess himself that he didn't have to try and win her over from other alpha males who scented her out as their mate. He was now worried about her visiting the Shadow Crest pack 100 times more. Alpha Austin was unmated and trustworthy. What if the goddess saw fit to bless him with Kel-Ann as his mate too? If he wasn't right there when she arrived and she was blessed with more than one mate, she would never know he was her mate and just give in to the goddess-gifted bond and he would lose her instantly. He heard Havoc snarl in his mind loudly and viciously. It was the first he had felt him all day and it was near lunchtime. Derek had not even realized that his wolf was back with him, sneaky bastard, so very quiet he had been, goddess knows how long he had been there watching from within. Stalking his own human counterpart. Jackson and Stephen had reported her leaving her apartment this morning, taking the pups with her. They had gone to the beach. No further reports had come in. He could only presume she was still there, for he knew they would report all her movements for the day without hesitation. They returned to the hotel suite just after 2 p.m., both seemingly in a much better mood than when they had left. They were both smiling and chuckling about something, a private joke of some sort. Havoc was instantly displeased at their lack of report the second they had walked in the door. He wanted to know about his mate, not a second should he have to wait to hear it, and he let out a low warning growl to alert them to his annoyance at their slackness to report to him the instant the door opened and they walked in. "Down, boy." Jackson smiled at him. "She had a nice day at the beach. I even film her for you, so you can see for yourself." Stephen nudged him and started laughing. "Start the clock now, hey." Derek frowned at them both. What was that about? He held his hand out. Both he and Havoc wanted to see her, especially if she'd had a nice day, perhaps she would smile. He missed her smiling at him. Jackson flicked through his phone and then handed it over to him. It was quite a long video. It looked as though Jackson had just let it run the whole time they were with her, watching her and his pups. He did note that Jackson's phone battery was low, sitting at only 10%. He'd likely not get to watch all of it before the battery died. Derek sent a copy to his phone before hitting the play button. He didn't care what was on it, he wanted it on his own phone to watch whenever he saw fit, or when Havoc wanted to or needed calming down. If it was a nice day, then surely what they were about to watch would calm his beast when raging about. His eyes, with Havoc right there on the surface, never left the screen as he watched her run around and play with their pups. She was in that tiny blue and white bikini, goddess. She was beautiful, wonderful with the pups. He could watch her all day long. She jumped around and threw their pups into the water, or the cleavage that was fully visible for all to see, and when she bent over completely, and he gave her a wink. The goddess could even think of him as bending over her. He is pounding hard and fast inside her, making her bend over anything and everything to get what she wants. Havoc too was practically drooling over their mate. She looked so very happy with their pups, it only made his desire for her increase. A nice day at the beach indeed. Havoc could see Arya at times and whined for his mate. He missed her, wanted her, needed her, just as much as Derek wanted Kellen herself. The pups all seemed so happy, running about on the beach with her and playing with each other. He hoped they would like him, he knew they could bond quickly with them. It would be completely natural, they would be drawn to him as he was to them, but could he have that kind of relationship with them one day too? He certainly hoped so. The phone died and he nearly smashed it. At the sudden loss of seeing his mate on the screen, Jackson retrieved it from him quickly before he could slam it to the ground. "Use your phone, boss." He laughed at the sudden change of temperament from him and Havoc. They had indeed been happy and calm watching the footage of their mate and pups, and when it had suddenly gone, Havoc's anger had been instant. "Why don't you go watch it in private?" Jackson added, still smiling. Stephen punched him in the arm. "That's cheating." Derek frowned at the two of them, but it was a good idea. He wouldn't mind watching it on his own. Some alone time would allow him and Havoc to react naturally without worrying about anyone else seeing it. He simply nodded, stood up and grabbed his phone and headed for his bedroom and closed the door. He heard both of them burst out laughing, and frowned. Was he missing something? He shook his head. He didn't care at this very minute and dismissed it. Fools, the pair of them. But they had brought him an hour-long video of his mate and pups. He was truly thankful for that, and so was Havoc for that matter. Fools, yes, but good friends indeed. Goddess, the more he watched it the more he wanted her, his body reacting to her near na*kedness was hard to ignore now that he was alone. He took the video and hit the shower to sort out his needs. When he did finally get her back in his bed, she was not getting out of it for days. She would not be able to walk when he was finished with her, she would be all weak-kneed and jelly-legged and utterly exhausted, not to mention hoarse from all the screaming she was going to be doing, and he knew he could do it to her, had done many times before. He could already picture in his mind what he was going to do to her. Goddess, he was aroused all over again, just thinking about the different positions he was going to take her in, the sounds of her moaning, the begging she would do when she was ready for him but he was still enjoying tasting her and teasing her, the way she would call to him. "Please Alpha," in that SE*XY desire-filled voice of hers when she couldn't stand it anymore and was desperate to have him inside of her, the scent of her arousal around him, driving him insane with need to furiously mate out of her till she screamed his name. He was never getting out of this shower at this rate. He flopped down on his bed sometime later with just a towel and nothing else on, sleep begging at him. His eyes turned to his phone and he let the video play again and drifted off to sleep watching her play with their pups. This was his family. He woke to rage pouring through every fiber of him. Havoc was going absolutely ballistic inside his mind. He was ripping at everything and was in full control, and Derek had no idea what was going on. "Jackson," he roared through the mind link, calling for his beta to help him understand the situation at hand. It was a losing battle trying to take back control because all he was getting from Havoc was kill, kill, kill. Derek could feel that his body was already in the process of shifting, he could hear his bones snapping and cracking. He was fighting with everything he had to reg control, but whatever had happened he had slept right through it, but obviously Havoc had not. "I know," Jackson shot back. His voice sounded as though he was in pain. "Working on it, resist, with everything you have, boss." There was desperation and fear in his voice and he could feel that all three of them were on his half-shifted body, trying to contain Havoc and his rage, who had complete control, and there was no way Derek was getting it back it seemed unless Havoc willingly gave it up. Havoc was shoving him back to the darkest corner of his mind. He did not want to be contained, he wanted his bloodlust filled. At all cost. Derek was desperately trying to stop him from attacking his friends. He could feel Havoc lashing out and them all trying to stop him. The growling and snarling that was coming from all of them was tremendously loud and aggressive. "Get him out of the apartment!" Now he heard Jackson yelling at someone. His wolf hearing picked up Kellen's voice. Jackson must have called her. He was trying to contain Havoc and hold down a conversation at the same time. Was he crazy? He needed all his focus here. Unless you want your human friend to die, get him out now. Havoc was ripping at the three of them. He could feel it, they were trying to hold him down, but his beast was insanely strong. When as full phage as it appeared he was, they were not able to pin him down and hold him down, it seemed, and therefore a fight was ensuing. They were trying to stop what Derek could only imagine was a killing spree of magnitude proportions, of everything in his path, not to mention a half-shifted alpha wolf running from here to her place. Only one thing could have set his beast off into this kind of murderous rage. Either Kellen was having S*X with her human boyfriend or was about to. Pain hit him too at the thought of that. Not even wanted to know which it was. Havoc's reaction was pure anomalistic rage. Derek was now fighting twice as hard. There was no guarantee that Kellen would come out of this unscathed, even if she did not know they were her mate. Havoc knew, and this type of thing had not gone down so well last time. Havoc had nearly killed his mate last time. Kellen, damn it! I need to hear you tell him to leave. Jackson was trying to convey the urgency of the situation to her, but she had no idea of how dangerous a situation she was in right this minute, had no idea of Havoc's rage, that it could be so uncontrollable. It's my life, why? You don't understand. He's here in the city and is going ballistic. Havoc is in complete control. Tell him to leave or he will die, Kellen. I'm 100% serious, he snapped, using all his beta authority to fly and convey just how important it was. Give me a minute, she muttered, seemingly unimpressed. Don't hang up, need to hear it, he yelled as he crash-tackled all his weight onto Havoc, using all of Apollo's strength to help him hold onto Havoc. How could she not understand the urgency with all the growling and snarling and fighting she must be hearing on her end of the line? This was probably the right time for Havoc to unleash his mate call, but the beast was so blinded by his rage and bloodlust that he didn't seem to have the sense to know it. There was a conversation at the other end of the line. Derek strained to hear it over the fighting, knowing if he heard it Havoc would too. There was a man with her. He recognized the name Tim and heard her ask him to leave, made up some excuse about a work emergency. She stayed on the line until he was gone. He's gone, are you happy now? She snapped, sounding angry, and disconnected the call, but at least she had actually listened and complied. She was alone now in her apartment. Returning his attention to the current situation unfolding in the hotel suite, Derek could hear all three of them begging him to calm down, to relinquish control back to Derek, reassuring Havoc that nothing had happened, that the man had only been in her apartment for 10 minutes, and that nothing had happened. There hadn't been enough time for anything to happen between them. Havoc was not happy at all, his rage needed to be let out. Havoc, buddy. Derek tried cajoling him. We're in the human world, you can't go out of the room. You can't go and kill anything. Please buddy, calm down. He was practically begging his beast. Kill him, touch mate back to not being able to string a full sentence together again. Not today, Derek said, but not taking it off the table, just moving it to another time in the hope that his beast would calm down. Derek could smell blood. It was heavy in the air, it was a mixture of all their blood including his own. He felt Havoc actively stop fighting them, and he finally got to see through Havoc's eyes, as Havoc stopped trying to keep him in the deepest recesses of their mind. His men had backed away slowly, all their wolves on the surface ready to try and contain him again, if he should lash out again or try to rip through them to get out of the hotel suite. He was still half-shifted, all claws out and teeth showing. They were all injured from trying to contain him. Ethan had a bite mark on his right shoulder and gashes from Havoc's claws to his CH3ST and arms. Stephen was covered in claw marks all over his CH3ST, his shirt shredded to pieces, and there was more than one bite mark on his arms. Jackson's clothing was practically non-existent, just tattered shreds. He had claw marks on both his legs across his ch3st and one gash down his face. He had probably been the first one to respond to Havoc's sudden appearance and took the initial brunt of the fighting. Who had made the phone call he had no idea, he didn't have a clue as to what was going on or how this had all come about. Havoc was still in control but was standing still, snarling still coming from him, aggression still with him, though the massive growling he had been doing during the fighting was gone. He was calming down. Relinquish, buddy. I'm sorry, I don't understand, he apologized to Havoc. Then Havoc was suddenly gone, his body shifted back to his human form so fast that Derek stumbled and fell to the ground, landing on his knees. His eyes moved to Jackson, Steven, and Ethan questioningly. Havoc was completely gone, almost like the day Sophia had rejected them. He couldn't sense him at all. Not good. What happened? He asked. Their wolves were staring at him through his friend's eyes. They were starting to be healed by their wolves as well. With no pack doctor, they would have to heal on their own. I don't understand. And he didn't. Last thing he recalled was how happy he and Havoc alike were watching that video as they drifted off to sleep. He was watching all of them, and all three of them stood there still, weary that Havoc would return. He's gone, I assure you. I can't even feel him, he said, and got up off the floor to go and get pants. He turned towards his room and stopped and stared at the destruction that had been wrought. There were claw marks all over the bedding, it was torn to shreds, springs from the mattress could be seen, there was broken furniture, a busted chair lying on the left of the bed, the bedside table was shattered and wooden shards were everywhere, claw marks were all over the walls behind it. The carpet was ripped and torn in several places about the room. The fight had not stayed in one place as they had tried to contain him, the curtains were ripped and hanging off the rod. There was blood everywhere. They had managed to keep him contained in the bedroom, it appeared, but they had been tossed about all over the place in their attempt to get a hold of him and keep him down. They had all been fighting Havoc. The destruction of the room was clear, they had been fighting with everything they'd had. Thank the goddess, they all trained together and knew him, how to handle him and his beast. He turned to look at them and noted one of the doors to his room was hanging off its hinges and there were not only claw marks on it but teeth marks as well. He had nearly gotten out, it appeared. He muttered, his eyes moved back to his friend's guilt washing over him. I'm sorry, but what happened? His wounds were already healing, much faster than theirs, a bonus of being an alpha. He pulled a pair of pants on and headed for the med kit that they took everywhere with them in case of emergencies, this counted. He took it back to them and opened it so he could start tending to their wounds. He would be fine, it seemed. For although he could no longer feel Havoc, the beast that resided within him, buried somewhere deep down inside of him, was actively healing him. You went to sleep after your very long shower, you were gone so long. I checked on you, Ethan stated. His wolf thorn receded now, and accepted the help offered to clean his wounds. You crashed out completely. I knew you weren't sleeping well of late, so we didn't bother to wake you. It's nearly 10 p.m. Alpha, you slept like the dead all afternoon and well into the night. Then Steven got a call to report Tim going into Kellen's apartment. He was carrying an overnight bag. Havoc must have heard it. He sighed and winced when Derek cleaned the bite mark from Havoc with rubbing alcohol. I felt everything change in an instant and turned to see your whole body rigid. The atmosphere was rapidly changing, anger was suddenly pouring off of your sleeping body, and I knew Havoc had heard the call. Jackson sighed as he was attending to Steven's wounds like Derek was to Ethan. The two of them tried to contain you while I tried to call her. It took her a minute to pick up. I didn't think she was going to actually. Maybe Havoc picked up on it, then he was shifting and I knew two of us were never going to be enough to contain him. I hit the speaker phone and tossed it on the table to come to their aid. Havoc was not happy about Apollo using all his strength to try and hold him down. We took a bit of a beating, as you can see. Havoc was growling and snarling about killing everything Derek could well imagine. A full-blown fight broke out and we had to use everything we had to contain him, try to pin him down as best we could. As you can see, he looked at the destruction of the room behind him. Not very well done, your beast is unpredictable, turned on us quite quickly. When she finally picked up, I had to tell her to get him out or Havoc was going to kill him. I let her know you were here in the city. Sorry boss, but I had to. It had to be done. He couldn't blame them. It was his beast who had started it. They had used everything from their training and knowledge of him and how he and his wolf fought and managed to contain him, thank the goddess. They all turned at the sound of banging on the hotel room door. They were all covered in blood. Derek shooed them away to another room. He was the least injured, shoved all the gauze and wound dressings behind the couch and out of sight of the door, then ran to wash his CH3ST and arms using all the speed he could, grabbed a clean towel and dried himself off, calling out just 1 minute / A female voice called right back, I am the night manager. Open the door now. There has been a complaint. Her voice was calm but authoritative. She was confident in her position and her dealings with rowdy guests. He still had a few welts but there were no actual open wounds. He walked over and took a deep breath as she banged on the door again. LM coming in, she yelled. Derek plastered on his most charming smile and opened the door before she could use her master key card to access the suite. He leaned on the door frame right in front of her. He was shirtless and his pants were hung very low on his hips. All his glorious muscles were on display for her to see. He aimed his smile right at her and dropped his voice to a low tone that he would reserve for his mate in future. How may I help you, my dear? He watched as her eyes widened at the sight of his body and rippling muscles. Her eyes wandered over him and lingered on his deep V-line. His smile turned into an outright smirk. He knew he was damn good looking. No human woman could ever resist him. She could barely contain her desire and lust. He could smell it already. Derek cleared his throat to get her attention away from his low-hung pants and back to his very deep blue eyes, and she visually shook herself trying to regain her composure. There was a noise complaint, animal noises. We don't allow pets here. Oh, I'm sorry, the boys and Elle were watching a monster movie and we like to turn the volume all the way up. He knew as the night manager she would know how many people resided in the room. She was staring at him, not sure whether to believe him or not. He winked playfully at her. You want to join us? He allowed his eyes to wander over her body slowly, seductively. We're quite friendly and would all like some company. He put forward his suggestive tone, implying all four of them would enjoy sharing her. He watched her brown eyes widen. No, she visually shuddered. A little scared and disgusted, he thought, well, keep it down then. We'll keep it down, he nodded, still smiling all seductively like at her, allowing his eyes to move over her body again to linger on her hips for almost a full minute. If you change your mind, he let it linger unsaid. Keep it down or I'll have to ask you to leave. She frowned up at him, ignoring the implied meaning he'd left hanging unsaid. Of course, please do apologies to the other guests. And he stepped back into the room and closed the door, one last playful wink at her before it closed. She wouldn't be coming back in a hurry, too scared she'd end up with 4 men doing her at once, which is exactly what he wanted her to think. There weren't that many women who would come back for something like that. Jackson stepped out of the room they had all disappeared into and stared at him and shook his head. Really, a gangbang? That was your go-to? She won't come back, and that is the point. He shrugged, then returned his attention to their wounds. They would all be healed by morning, but, until then a few patches were needed, and Stephen had to have some staples which he knew the man would just pluck out in the morning, nothing he couldn't handle. How they would explain the state of the room, He had no idea. A load of money, he imagined, along with the cost of the repair and refurbishment of the suite. Chapter 24. Kellen POV. Staring at the unknown number that was calling her new number, it did look familiar but she couldn't quite place it. Tim was in the kitchen making them a cup of tea. He smiled at her and she smiled right back. She had leaned into his hug when he had arrived and really hugged him back. She had needed it. He had chuckled and murmured, "Miss me sweets?" Kellen had smiled, just could really use a hug. He had squeezed her tightly at her words and not let go until she had stepped away from him. He was so good to her. She answered the phone when Tim stared at her with a raised eyebrow at her hesitation. Maybe he thought she was embarrassed to take the call, or that she didn't want to, so he didn't know who it was. She had never cheated on him, never even considered it. "Get him out of the apartment now," was yelled at her down the line. She recognized Jackson's voice instantly. "How did you get this number?" she demanded. "Get him out of the apartment now," he yelled again. Kellen could hear growling and snarling in the background. She frowned. It sounded as though he was in the middle of a fight. But why call her of all people, in the middle of a fight with another wolf? Didn't he have his priorities straight? "Unless you want your human friend to die, get him out now." She and Arya turned their attention to the background noise. The fight clearly involved several wolves. "Kellen, damn it, I need to hear you tell him to leave." "It's my life." "Why?" she stated, not getting why, in the middle of a fight he was having, was it so important to call her and demand her boyfriend leave? He had no right to ask that, no one did. "You don't understand, he's here in the city and is going ballistic, all havoc. Tell him to go, or he will die, Kellen. I'm 100% serious." He was throwing his beta aura down the line but also seemed to be struggling to maintain the fight he was in. His tone left no room for argument. If Derek was indeed here and havoc was out and coming for Tim, due to the fact there was another man around his pups, then she had no doubt that havoc would kill him. "Give me a minute," she muttered, unimpressed that they actually had this much control over her life. She was going to have to comply to keep Tim safe. She didn't want any harm coming to Tim. He was such a nice man and she really did like him. "Don't hang up." Need to hear it, he was yelling, not at her, she thought, but to be loud enough to be heard over the angry growling and snarling and banging and crashing that was going on wherever they were, while they were dealing with the alpha wolf. A shiver of fear ran down her spine. She walked over to Tim, who had literally just got here like 5 minutes ago, and barely had time to make them a cup of tea. "Tim, I'm so sorry, an emergency has come up. One of my clients has stupidly breached his AVU and is begging me to help him. Do you want me to stay and watch the children, wait for you?" "No, I'll call Suzy, it's probably going to take a while, it's not the first breach either." "Ah. All right sweets," he nodded, but sounded disappointed to her. He'd obviously been looking forward to tonight. "Again, am so sorry, Tim. I get it, I have clients too, that no matter what they don't do as they are told." He grabbed his overnight bag that he'd brought with him. It was the first time he'd packed to come over here. She really did feel bad for sending him away, if only he could know the real reason. She walked him out the door, her phone still in her hand. He turned and leaned down to kiss her. Kellen didn't know if that was a good idea. It might be picked up with Wolf hearing and make things worse. She indicated to Tim that she was still on the phone. He nodded, sighed, and hugged her briefly before heading for the elevator. "I'll call you," he nodded to her, and she smiled thankfully and apologetically at him. She put the phone to her ear after closing the door and snapped, "He's gone, are you happy now?" and hit the end call button. She was not only angry with them, but with herself. She should not have let them force her hand, but by the sound of it, Havoc was on a rampage of unknown proportions, and she had truthfully believed Jackson when he told her that he was 100% serious. So she had to comply. She hated obeying them for him. Kellen woke in the morning with a start. There was loud aggressive banging on her apartment door. She shot out of her bed. Was he here? Fear was already filling her. She got out of bed in such a rush that she nearly fell face first onto the floor as her feet were tangled in the sheets. Nate was up and standing in the twins' doorway. They too were up and he had his arms protectively around them. "It's going to be okay, stay here," she told them, pushing them into the twins' room and closing the door. If things went badly and a fight broke out, she did not want them to see it. She stood before the front door and listened to the thunderous banging on it. How had they gotten past the doorman without him notifying her? "Damn it, Kellen, open the door, or I'm kicking it in," Michael's voice yelled from the other side of the door. Relief that it wasn't her alpha coming for his children swept through her, though this was just another alpha come to think of it. His wolf hearing would have heard her coming to the door, and his wolf senses must have picked up her scent by now, knowing she was at the door. "How did you get up here? How do you think? I went through your doorman. Open the door now." "Okay," she said a little nervously. This was just what she needed in her life. 2 alpha wolves after her. She opened the door and he barged right in, stepping up to her without hesitation. She stumbled back a few steps, then Arya rose to the forefront where he could see her. "Don't be stupid," he snapped at her, and her wolf, "You will fix it," he roared at her, anger spilling off of him. "Fix what?" she asked, not knowing what he was talking about. "Fix what?" he screamed in her face. "What do you think? Ray left me, it's all your fault. Fix it." She could feel his anger boiling over and filling the air around her. She hadn't meant to hurt him and Ray. It had just happened that way. She was truly sorry to hear Ray had left him. His phone was ringing and he grabbed it, jabbed an angry finger at it after checking the caller ID, and before he could get any words out, Kellen heard Derek's voice roar an alpha order down the phone, "Get out of her apartment now." A shiver ran down her spine. She knew the power of that order, had been ordered by him with so much rage behind it too once. His voice now reminded her of the pain of it hitting her back then and forcing her to leave even though she hadn't truly wanted to. Derek knew Michael was there in her apartment. How close was he? Fear was building again, on top of what was already there. Michael backed out of the apartment, but his eyes never left hers. "Fix it," he shot at her. Kellen nodded at him, indicating that she would try too, hoping he understood that she was going to try. She closed the door as he walked away. Her heart was hammering inside her chest. She turned on her heels, pushed the door to the twins' room open. They were all standing. "They're staring up at her. We're leaving. Get dressed quickly." She saw them all move. None of them even argued. Kellen packed just one suitcase for her and then, tossing in whatever she grabbed from the first drawer in each of their rooms, not really caring, yanked on a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. Took the triplets and put them in her car and drove away from her apartment at high speed. She ignored her ringing mobile the whole time. It was ringing before she was even packed. She had seen it was the same number as last night. Jackson was calling her. She just pushed it into her back pocket and let it ring out. She didn't care about anything other than getting her children to safety right this minute. She was headed for Tony and Lauren's place. Their house was in a gated community and was surrounded by a 10-feet-high brick wall with security cameras everywhere. She had always felt safe with them, behind their security protocols. Thank the goddess, Old Man Hill loved his daughter to bits, insisted on the walls and the security cameras. Kellen could also try talking to Ray, Lauren and Tony while she was there. She had ruined their mate bond, had not meant to, and she needed to try and fix it. It was a goddess-gifted bond. Michael had not chosen Ray Ray, she belonged to him and he to her, it was sacred. She had a responsibility to try and salvage it if she could. She pulled her car up out the front of their house, having used the gate code to get past the big gates. She got the triplets out of the car and grabbed the one suitcase she had packed and walked them up the front door, pressed the doorbell while she was fumbling in her handbag looking for the front door key to their house. It was barely 7 in the morning. She thought they would be awake, but whether they were out of bed she didn't know. It was Sunday morning, they could be lie-in. The door opened and Lauren stood there in her pajamas, took in Kellen and the triplets' unkempt appearances. She had not stopped to brush their hair or teeth, or even feed them for that matter. They must all look disheveled and she simply stepped aside. "Sorry Lauren, I didn't have anywhere else to go right this minute." "It's all right honey." "What is wrong?" she asked, concern lacing her voice. How was she going to explain this, that Michael had practically beat down her door after beating up her doorman, to demand that she come here and talk to Ray Ray, or that his brother was now here for her children? Kellen hadn't even told Tony and Lauren that the triplets were Derek's yet. Whether they had figured it out for themselves she did not know. She hadn't ever mentioned him to them and her babies certainly didn't know who their father was. If she just suddenly blurted it out in front of them, they might be hurt. "Can we stay here for the night, or a few days maybe?" "Of course honey. Is that all the luggage you brought?" "Yes," she nodded, "no time to pack." Lauren sighed and nodded. "Okay, you should call Eric right away if it's got to this point." She then smiled down at the triplets. "Off to the kitchen, let's get you some breakfast, hey?" They all nodded and went down the hall towards the kitchen. Lauren's hand landed on Kellen's shoulder. "How bad is it?" "I don't know. It wasn't him that got me to leave actually." "Then who?" "I need to talk to you all, including Ray Ray." Lauren sighed heavily and looked up the stairs to the second floor. She hasn't been out of her room since dinner on Friday night. Kellen. "I'm sorry, I never meant to hurt their relationship," she apologized, meaning every word. Lauren shrugged. They'd only known each other for 2 weeks by that time. "I'm not concerned, she'll get over it. Probably for the best." Kellen understood where Lauren was coming from, but she knew Ray Ray, on the other hand, was in terrible pain. She didn't truly understand why she was feeling so utterly heartbroken, unable to cope with the loss of a man she had barely known. Logically, she would try as a human to convince herself she would be okay, that she hadn't known him well at all and that she was just being silly. But she was a gift to him and he to her. Their very souls were meant for each other, and if they couldn't be together, neither of them would ever be the same again. "Breakfast first," Lauren interrupted her thoughts. Kellen nodded. Though she doubted she would eat much. "I'll take Ray Ray's up to her. She won't eat, just sends it back untouched." "I'll convince her," Kellen assured her, and she intended on convincing Ray Ray to eat, how she didn't know yet. She couldn't tell Ray Ray that Michael had threatened her if she didn't fix it. He had not so much as said it with words, but she understood his anger all too well. She was going to fix it or he was going to blame her for everything and come for her. He'd already gone to her, telling her that would only make Ray Ray more scared of him, and Kellen had to talk her into giving him another chance. The children were quiet. She asked them when in the car, not to mention the very angry man who had come to their apartment this morning, prompting their sudden leaving and coming here. Kellen took the breakfast tray up to Ray Ray's room, knocked gently on the door and let herself in. Ray Ray was lying in her bed. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy from all the crying she had been doing. Her eyes moved to Kellen and she burst into tears. Kellen sighed. She was the reason Ray Ray had backed away from Michael and probably did not want to see her right now. Kellen couldn't blame her either. Her whole world had come crumbling down that night. Kellen walked over to the bed regardless, and set the tray down on the bedside table. Ray, I'm so sorry, I never meant to hurt you and Michael. It's not you, Kellen. She sat up and looked at her, tears still brimming in her big brown eyes. He knew you were like a sister to me. I told him as much and he didn't tell me who he was related to on purpose, kept it from me. Maybe, Kellen offered up, he didn't want to scare you off. She didn't think that was it, but what else could she say when she was there on his behalf technically? He hurt me, he lied to me. Do you know how many times he could have told me? Elle should have listened to Mum and Dad. I don't know him at all, I'm so stupid. She sobbed the last 3 words. Kellen sat down on the bed next to her and put her arms around the girl. You're not stupid. Yes, he should have told you, but I'm sure he has his reasons. Have you talked to him at all about it? Let him explain it to you. She shook her head. I don't want to talk to him. Yes you do, deep down Ray, you do. I've been there myself once. It hurts like hell, but still you want to talk to the man you love. Her own words were laced with pain, the same pain she knew Ray was feeling right this minute. It was the same pain she had felt herself when she had left the pack, at the order of the man she had loved. I'll never love anyone else again, Ray suddenly burst out. Kellen sighed. That, unfortunately, was probably more true than Ray could ever understand. She took a deep breath and did what was the right thing, for her human sister, regardless of what Lauren and Tony would think of it. She pushed Ray slightly away from her embrace and tilted her chin up to make her look at her. I love you, Ray. So I am going to tell you something and I want you to listen to me and understand me, okay? At her nod, Kellen continued. Elle grew up with the Brownings right there, practically in their house. Ray and Michael is a good person. I have honestly never seen him do anything bad in the whole time I knew him. He is very protective of his family, including his brother, I would imagine. If Michael told you he loved you, then I do not doubt his words, I believe he meant it. He is a kind and caring man and he will love you with everything he has. I'm not sure why he didn't tell you about his brother and my history. Past history. Which Michael had nothing to do with. Even his parents, Blaine and Darla, were always nice to me, fair and decent people, and I do believe they were also genuinely going to welcome you into their family. They would also never hurt you. I can assure you of this where they are concerned. She was quiet for many minutes thinking about everything Kellen had said. But his brother is horrible, she sighed. How can I be in the same family? LD have to see him at my wedding, and would you come if he was there? Yes, you will have to see him, he'll be nice to you. It is me he has the problem with. Let it be that way, Ray. Do not let the animosity between his brother and I get between you and Michael. Do not wish that. I want you to be happy. But... Kellen cut her off. Do you know Michael came to see me, in person? Begged me to come and talk to you. He really does love you, Ray, and it is killing him that you have left him. Please call him, give him a chance. I saw with my own eyes how much he loves you. It wasn't exactly the truth, but Michael had turned up at her place and demanded she go to see Ray. It was a tiny white lie. What harm could it do if it fixes their goddess-gifted mate bond? I don't know. It's just one phone call, or maybe a cup of coffee. She could see that Ray was actually thinking about it. It might take time, but she would come around, Kellen thought. I'll let you think about it, sweetie. Kellen got up and headed out of the room. Kellen. She turned as she was about to step out and close the door. Do you believe in love at first sight? She asked timidly. Yes, I do. Kellen answered with honesty. That's what the goddess-gifted mate bond was, love at first sight, the pairing of two perfectly matched souls, or at least it was supposed to be. She knew not every bond worked out, mostly due to unfortunate circumstances, but she would not let Ray or Michael end like that. Call him. And eat something, your mum is really worried, she said, and then left the room. She saw from the corner of her eye right before the door closed Ray reach for her phone on the pillow next to her. Hopeful she had said enough to help fix it, it was now up to Michael to explain why he lied to her. It was all in his hands now. She knew that Ray would want to go back to him. The bond would pull her towards him always. Just hearing his voice would be enough for her to crave to be with him. She stopped and sat on the staircase, took her phone out. There were half a dozen missed calls from Jackson's number, all the voice messages were the same one, just want to know if you're okay, call me back, she sighed. They probably thought she had run away with his pups, they were probably hunting her at this very minute. She tapped the number to make the call. It connected after just one ring. Tell Michael I'm trying to help him. I never meant to hurt him or Ray, and then she disconnected the call. There was no room for any of them to try and talk to her, she was tired and needed some space, she was also still a little mad that they had been able to force her hand. Now they knew they could use that tactic on her. Are all her human friends and family now in danger? She hoped not. Kellen had thought she was safe with him back home in his pack, but he was here and in full breach of his court orders, but did it really surprise her? No, it did not. She knew he would come at some point, so did Arya. It had all just been a matter of time, I guess that time was up. The other thing she had to do today was weighing on her too. She had to tell Tony and Lauren about who Derek really was and why he was so insistent, not looking forward to that conversation, but it would have to be done, otherwise they would continuously send officers of the law after him where she and the children were concerned if he could force her to go back before she got to Shadow Crest Pack. That was looking likelier by the minute due to him being here and all. We can run tonight, Arya piped up. Yes you can, Arya, run for as long as you want in the reserve out back. The conversation with Ray, who had finally called Michael, Tony, and Lauren, took place after the triplets went to bed. She sat them down and explained her past to them and the reason he was now coming for her. He had found out about the triplets and wanted them all to go back there so he could be a part of their lives. She made mention of Sophia, called her his wife and why she had never told him about the children, because she didn't want to hurt his marriage and knew his wife disliked her and would hate the children. She had to alter a few things to make it more human sounding, but she put it as close to the truth as possible. They were all quiet for a long time, just staring at her, then Tony asked her, has he ever actually laid a hand on you? Those wounds? Kellen shook her head. No, his right-hand man, Jackson, you would have seen him at my office that day, had apparently instructed them to fetch me and no harm was to come to me, on the other hand wasn't having a bar of being kidnapped and fought back against them. My injuries were all sustained by the men I was fighting. She knew Tony had read her statement, it said as much. Of course, you would fight back, honey. Lauren sighed, what woman wouldn't? Ray was awfully quiet, her phone was in her hand and it dinged with the occasional message. Kellen could only imagine it was Michael. She was back to smiling again and she had come down for dinner. Eating finally. Tony and Lauren weren't all that happy about Ray and Michael talking again, but they were happy to see her smile and eat something. What do you think about their family? Tony asked. Honestly, Kellen. She told him pretty much the same thing she had told Ray, just leaving out the Michael and Ray specific stuff. And finished with they are a good family. As for the prenup, you likely won't need it. They are very wealthy and if Ray and Michael do get married he will give her everything she wants, he won't care about the cost. She will want for nothing, that much I do know. Ray smiled at her, there was actual joy in her eyes, she liked knowing that Kellen was not against the man she was in love with. Boy, was she in for a shock when he explained to her the process of mating and marking and her transformation into a werewolf in her first shift. He would not do that until she was in pack territory and so completely smitten and committed that she wouldn't bolt. Kellen didn't see Ray bolting. She did, however, foresee a phone call about whether she was a werewolf herself. "What are you going to do about Derek himself?" Tony asked. She watched as they all leaned forward for her answer. She didn't know, and she had to be very careful what she said now that she knew Ray and Michael were talking again. Anything she said could be relayed to him and he would certainly tell his brother. She shrugged. "I don't know, but my actual grandmother heard about what was going on and asked me to go visit her. So on Friday I will leave to go and stay there, have a look around and might stay with her. She has offered the triplets and Elle to move in with her, and her boss is willing to give me work in his law firm." "So you might move?" Lauren asked, shocked. "What about Tim?" Ray asked. "Typical." Kellen again shrugged. "Tim and I are good, but I don't think either of us are looking to get married, so it'll just stop." "But you've been with him for so long, aren't you in love with him?" Ray burst out. "I like Tim, but love? No, it's not love. It could never be. He wasn't her fated mate, not that she had ever met that person either. One day she hoped, too. It really would be nice to have someone just love and cherish you for no other reason than they love your very soul." Chapter 25. Derek POV. Just like that, she was gone. What else could he expect? After Michael beat up both her doorman and a security guard and then went storming up to her apartment and likely kick in her door to get to her, Derek was completely furious. His mate was under enough stress. She did not need another alpha-blooded wolf beating down or kicking in her door and threatening her, not to mention his pups were in that apartment. The stupid bastard had most likely scared them too. The phone call he had received from his warriors watching her building to let him know that Michael had gone over there and let his anger loose on her doorman and security guard had completely shocked him. He had thought Michael would have more sense than that. But it seems not. They had all piled into the rental car Jackson and Steven were using, Steven driving, and they were headed to her apartment. He had called Michael from his own phone, knowing his brother wouldn't dare to ignore the call, making certain that Michael knew. Derek knew exactly where he was and what he was doing. Michael knew that Derek was there. Had he lost his mind completely, going off all angry on the future Luna of their pack, if he hurt her physically, dared to lay a finger on her, Derek would banish him without a second thought, regardless of his parents' obvious objection that would come. Banishment would be better than death. He had roared an alpha order down the phone at him, but without Havoc present, he had no idea if the order would actually work on another alpha male. He guessed that depended on just how much his little brother feared and or respected him. Jackson was trying to call her, to get her to pick up, but she had not done so. No surprise there. Going to her apartment was risky because of the human court orders placed on him. He was in full breach of them, but tough, his mate came first. Besides, today might be the day. In less than 40 minutes he could be in her apartment with her, she would know what he was to her. That part excited him. He wanted to be in her apartment, smell her, hold her, kiss her, meet his children and hug them too. He wanted to be a family and this could be it. Michael had better not have screwed it up. His men had reported to him that Michael had left the building and was in a hurry. Derek was hoping it was due to his order and not because he had done something stupid like hurt her. She had not been with him, so he had not taken her. Derek had to make sure she was all right, unharmed. They were about halfway to her place when it was reported to him that she had left with the children in her car in a hurry. None of his warriors had a car with them. They were working in shifts and the team leaving took the car back to the hotel they were staying in. Only a general direction could be given. As to where she was going, it was anyone's guess. He had ordered surveillance of Timothy Bolton's place and Eric Stanton's place in case she went to one of them for help. He was betting on Eric Stanton. After last night she wouldn't risk Timothy, to Havoc's rage, which she would have heard loud and clear over the phone. What she made of it he didn't know. He wondered if she would tell Eric he was there in the city and have him tracked down and arrested for breaching his court order. His men had called for paramedics for the 2 injured men in the lobby. From what they could tell, they were both unconscious but still breathing. The minute she had left with the children, to goddess only knew where. He had ordered a change of location, heading instead for his parents' current residence. He knew that was where Michael was also staying, and Derek was betting he had run back to their parents for protection from him. Little did he know that was not going to help him right now, nothing was. Michael was about to get the beating of his life, wolf or no wolf, Derek was going to beat him senseless for his stupid actions. Derek had no idea where his mate or offspring were. Jackson was still trying to contact her, leaving voice messages for her to call back, but to no avail. She had probably turned off her phone at some point to stop the incessant ringing. After last night's phone call from Jackson, Kellen, he thought was probably expecting him to turn up at some point for his pups. She believed that was all he wanted, she believed he hated her, and was now more furious because she had kept his pups from him, which was not the case. He didn't blame her, couldn't actually, he had been the one to send her away and she had not known of their existence at that time. He wondered if she had thought it was him this morning banging down on her door. Now with what Michael had done this morning, Ray would be lucky if she had a mate when he was finished with his little brother, if their mate bond was fixed right away, their bond could wait. They had barely known each other 2 weeks, and she was only 18. They had plenty of time to sort it out after he had sorted out his. The future Luna must always come first. Ray was not in any kind of danger, unlike his mate and pups who were in danger every minute of every day, that they were out there with other packs trying to steal them from him. Michael should have well known this, should have known better. He had been at the restaurant when the SHT had hit the fan and Arya had gone to fight their father and break their mother. Her distress was obvious. Yet the stupid went and attacked his mate. Derek would not stand for it. The car pulled up outside and he was out of the car and stalking toward the serviced apartments his parents were living in and had rented for a month, expecting it to be difficult to get Ray's family to agree to her moving in with them and halfway across the country away from her family, pull her from her university degree and let her get married to a total stranger. He was pounding on the door furiously, he could just kick it in, but he wanted to instill fear into his little brother. He was probably doing the exact same thing Michael had done to Kellen's door, he realized. The door opened and his father stood right there. "Calm down, son. Where is that son of a bitch?" he roared, his anger boiling over now that he was here. He let it all out, he didn't need Havoc to kick his little brother from here to the moon goddess and back. He spotted him across the room and was off and running at full speed, shoving past his father, not caring if the man was knocked to the ground or not. His hands were around Michael's neck the minute he was close enough to grab onto him, and he was squeezing the life out of him. "I will kill you, do you know what you did? She's gone, you bastard," he was screaming in Michael's face. He saw Paxton push forward in order to defend his human counterpart. Derek didn't wait for him to start fighting back, slammed his knee up into his brother's rib cage as hard as he could, knocking the wind out of him and his wolf. He was a good foot taller than Michael and had an advantage. Michael had not had to receive all the training Derek had had to, he was a much better fighter and knew how to bring Michael and Paxton down. He repeatedly kneed the bastard in the abdomen without letting up, while his hands were still wrapped tightly around his throat. The boy would suffer. He could feel several sets of hands on him, trying to pull him away and pry his hands from Michael's throat. He could hear both his mother and father yelling at him, trying to order him to stop it, using all their Luna and Alpha powers against him, to make him let go. But he was not going to do so willingly, and if he had learnt anything from Havoc over the years, it was that, blinded by rage, nothing filtered through, not even an Alpha's order. He was filthy with blinding rage. He was being forcibly removed from his brother by his own men and his father. All of them had a hold of him, trying to pry his fingers from Michael's throat. The boy was on the verge of passing out for lack of oxygen. The minute his hands were pried loose, Michael took a deep breath. Derek was being dragged backwards but could still reach him, snapped his foot out and kicked him as hard as he could as he was being shoved backwards. Michael went stumbling backwards, hitting the wall behind him. Derek registered the fear in him, but he could only imagine Kellen's fear of him beating down her door, and his pups. How had they reacted? He lurched forward using all his strength and got another kick into his brother. The third kick was halted by his mother's body stepping in front of him. "Son, you need to calm down right now. Kill him if she runs and gets away," he roared at her. "I understand. Please, honey, calm down." His blue eyes met her blue ones. "Don't use that sh*t on me, I'm the Alpha now," he yelled at her, turning his anger towards her. She blinked in surprise. He had never really yelled at his mother before, always showed her respect, but right now his mate was gone and no one knew where to, and she was protecting the one responsible. His body was finally pinned down on the floor. He could feel it was his father and Storm who were doing most of the assisting now, forcing him down and using all of Storm's strength to keep him down. Yes, Jackson, Stephen and Ethan were all helping, but not with wolves out. They knew Havoc was not with him and were simply trying to contain him, for the second time in less than 24 hours. His eyes were burning into Michael. His brother was looking completely guilty, and so he should be, after what he had done. He heard Jackson's phone ring. "Get it," he yelled at him, in case it was her, only she mattered now. He heard her voice. It was soft and gentle, apologetic. "Tell Michael I'm trying to help him, I never meant to hurt him or Ray." Then the line was gone. His eyes moved back to Michael. "Are you happy now?" he grated out to his brother. "Get the FK off of me," he snapped at his father, Storm, Ethan, and Stephen, all of whom were still holding him down on the ground. His father's knee with Storm's strength was pushing into the middle of his back between his shoulder blades. "Are you going to stay off your brother?" his father asked him. "Just get off me," he snapped, and was pushing up off the ground with all the force and strength he had. If Havoc was present, they'd all be injured right now. They did all get off him. His father was the last to leave. His mother was standing directly in front of Michael, blocking his way to get to him again. "You had better not have screwed this up, or I will make you suffer the same fate," he snarled at him. He heard several horrified gasps in the room, for he had just implied if he lost his mate he would make sure so did Michael. Michael's eyes were wide with fear. He knew it was not a threat to be taken lightly. Havoc would kill him when he came back and found out what had happened, and right for that minute Derek wouldn't do anything to stop him. Havoc would have his bloodlust sated by his own kin's blood. "I'm sorry, Elle just wanted to get Ray back," he apologized. "I wasn't thinking." "No, you didn't. How would you like it if I marched over there and threatened your mate?" he snarled at his brother. "I'm sorry, I couldn't help it, I didn't know what else to do." There was no one else who could get to Ray, he pleaded his case. I don't care, you asshole. If you make her worse, you will suffer an eternity of pain and I'll give you to havoc. He was completely out of control and he knew it, but he just couldn't calm down. His rage was unchecked and uncontrollable. His alpha blood was boiling in his veins. He wondered if this was how Havoc felt when in a rage. Well, if it was, he now understood his beast a bit better. The urge to destroy and kill everything was burning inside of him. He kicked the coffee table next to him and it went flying across the room and smashed into the wall near his mother and brother, shattered wood and glass exploding all around them. His anger was not subsiding, it was still building to an unknown proportion. The sudden sting in his arm turned his head and he stared at it. A syringe was embedded all the way in. He saw liquid being pushed into him and barely had time to register what it was as the liquid burned into him. His eyes moved to his father's and he saw they had this apologetic look in them before everything was going dark and fuzzy around the edges and he felt himself start to fall down. That bastard had shot him up with a wolf's bane. Unconsciousness claimed him. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.